Hello, welcome to session 42 of my Not Your Average Bible Studies. My name is Allie with Amory Speaks. This will be a reading on chapter 21 of Matthew. Today is September 14th, 2025. Beautiful Sunday, glad to be alive, and happy to sit this afternoon. Actually, it was 14:14. It just turned to 14:15. And share the gospel and read the third portion of chapter 21. I will definitely round out the end of the chapter here today with the final parable, and we'll see where that takes me to talk. If you're brand new, thanks so much for checking this out. This is definitely a different way of looking and reading at the Bible. This is my first time ever reading New Testament, and just by that mere fact, I'm sure this is not average to a Bible study. Most people do that when, they're well versed in a certain theological text. They start doing a study of it or speaking about it, but I know that, but and I'm not trying to claim anything here, but merely offering instead a different type of offering, where a different type of interpretation and reading, where it is a first look at these things. I'm not reading it for the first time. Of course, I'm a little ahead in my own personal reading, but and I never had intended on reading these live, but I was so taken aback. Honestly, I really was shocked at the absolute truth and the wording in itself, and the concepts, the energetic concepts being spoken about, that I just had to do a reading. I had to slow it down, go back, and talk a bit about these things and share them for what I read within the lines, because seemed very profound. And I know there's an entire metaphysical Christian kind of look at things, which is why I've sort of named that this, and sort of in that kind of branch of discovery. So if those things interest you, welcome. Thank you for being here. If you come every Sunday and listen, thank you so much. Or maybe not every Sunday, but you've been here before, you're a subscriber or a listener. I really appreciate your energy and your commitment here. This Sacred Sunday, now almost 3 years, I have been working to have a day dedicated to spirituality, to speaking with God, to speaking my truth, to seeking the truth in God in a direct way. And of course, different routines and things have come through and changed, and some have not, and they've stayed the whole length of my journey so far. But this study here, coming every Sunday and reading verbatim the words, is definitely becoming one of my favorite parts of my routine. So thanks for being a part of it and being here, and I guess let's get down to it. I had left off last week I believe reading 32. So I think we'll start off just straight away with 33, where Jesus says, "Hear another parable" to the Pharisees, right? Oh, I love these roasts. We're getting really into the roasting of the corruption, between the intermingling relationship of synagogue and state back then, and just the absolute malignancy of it all, and how it's kind of spawned out these really nasty collections of people in different social standings and different governmental bodies and all these different ways society gathered back then. I just love these chapters to come here. Jesus is so, the words are so profound at calling out shadow for what it is. Negative service to self, Satanism, whatever we want to call that, negative evil alignment. I love nothing better than to hear truth spoken. So here we go. Let's let him speak, right? Instead of me. Hear another parable. There was a certain householder which planted a vineyard and hedged it round about, and digged a winepress in it, and built a tower, and let it out to husbandmen, and went into a far country. And when the time of the fruit drew near, he sent his servant to the husbandmen, that they might receive the fruits of it. The husbandman took his servants and beat one, and killed another, and stoned another. Again he sent other servants, more than the first, and they did unto them likewise. But last of all he sent unto them his son, saying, They will reverence my son. But when the husbandmen saw the son, they said amongst themselves, This is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and let us seize on his inheritance. And they caught him, and cast him out of the vineyard, and slew him. When the Lord therefore out of the vineyard cometh, what will he do unto those husbandmen? Now this is very interesting here. First and foremost, to me, it's interesting because there's kind of a dual story told here. And there's the quite obvious one, the reference of the Son and God sending his Son, and that they'll kill him. And Jesus said quite plainly already they're going to kill him, and he'll rise after 3 days. And he's already sort of claimed the terminology and stated plainly, that he is the Son of God. However, the kind of aspect or perspective I wanted to listen or look at this parable from, what I kind of heard in there, which is a typical thing for me, and I've sort of pointed out within parables some of this stuff before, but who is this man who is the Lord holder? Right? Really? Who is this good man? And there's always this frame of reference about a lord and an owner of the physical place, and then them stepping out of it to create, a subservice there, and then the assumptions that they put upon the Lord. It's so curious to me. To read between the lines and hear and listen to what the social contracts and constructs of, mainstream general knowledge to build a parable speaks greatly of people around them, what their knowledge base is, what their points of relativity are, what are their common references and common laws and common morality and ethic lie at, right? And of course, since I'm very disconnected from these people in these times, it's a curious point of intrigue for me. And also I have to work a little bit differently to connect dots to something that might be well assumed by people who are traditionally exposed to these kind of things, or culturally this is more of a natural stance for them. Because to me, I'm always wondering, why is anyone letting out their home in the first place? What happened to the glory and gift of working your land and being in connection with the processes? Why is there always this great, I must go to a far off land now kind of thing happening? And maybe it's just a rich people, upper society, aristocracy, hierarchical referencing that was much more inbred into them back then. And so it makes a lot more sense for something that wouldn't be questioned in a way, it doesn't belong to be questioned even in this line of the parable. It might seem irrelevant, but I think, it goes to show the common goodness that links them in the morality and that behind it all, to have this almost taken for granted, the fact that someone could be even honored and respected and loved enough to have an assumption in a world that they could leave their private property and not be infiltrated and not have those who are set to watch over it greedily seek to usurp the position and cut under and take what's not theirs but lay claim to it. That to me would be something that would be, it's almost like how stupid and foolish and naive of this great Lord to go far away and to not expect that. But again, it's different times, it's different cultures, it's a whole other set and setting, but to draw off that and to say that, to go forth now, and and to say the situation, let's not take for granted what they're saying, but take in stride what they're saying about having a good lordship and having this wonderful positive assumption on the world around you, a secure state in positive serving systems to where actually holistically people could contribute to an actual industrial organic version of whole that would be in a state like that would actually be valued and upheld, right? And that one would go away and have these assumptions that they would be rightfully honored well out of place, if that was the sort of prescribed regularity of normalcy, then how dare these thieveries, it would be sort of the wolf in sheep's clothing that would need to infiltrate. It would be seen as a liars and thieves and those who sin or go against others or who think, abusive, harmful thoughts and segregatorily winner takes all kind of this like survival of the fittest YOLO mindset, right? If that wasn't a majority, if that was a rare happening, if that was an oddity or a mutation, like we were told it used to be when wholesome societies used to exist, so to speak, if that was true, then we see a whole underpinning lesson and layer to Jesus's parable here with those men, and how dare they, the husbandmen, and what type of corrupt, inorganic, evil rottenness has taken place within them to come upon that. To me, I would say, well, they must have been wrong done. They must have had bad assumptions about this Lord who was there beforehand, or must be so disconnected from him that they can easily create it as an enemy. This brings back the age-old enemy and the stranger, and the difference between those who are known and close to us and who are brothers or of relation and of respect and love. Because you could never or would never harm someone who is in that type of proximity of connection to someone that you respected and loved. But for them to do that, of course, what a dishonoring. And then it's interesting, again, to put the placement of the parable directly onto running parallel with what the Pharisees, Sadducees, what the entire kind of Jewish religion as a empire is Jesus is pointing to, about the corruption within them and the falsity and the inverted behaviors and the absolute disregard for the position that they were granted, and of course then if we just apply it very literal and directly, and he's saying, of course, he's that son, and then it's to look at that even deeper, to say, okay, well, if Jesus is implying he's the son and he's telling this parable to them for them to understand in their time, their current time, John the Baptist came before him. There's, who's the others who come before him? I don't know, because I don't know the timings, but people who were alive at that time, it must have been quite clear to them who those prior servants to be sent, who were maimed and hung and burnt and stomped and stoned and all these other reasons and things that he says happened to those others prior. Those must have a really tangible reference point culturally to them, right? To say that you must know right now who I'm referencing, and the final son, and now you want to steal the inheritance from it. So again, Jesus is proclaiming the wealth that he has as a great gift of the light bestowed within him from the Father, the connection to that as being a right for each one of us here, and that they're trying to steal and hoard this inheritance and keep it for themselves versus, paying homage and giving it to who and what it's due for the Father and for the true owner of the real lands. But again, they put themselves and prop themselves up in this position so close to the sun, so to speak, just far enough away as to that they don't melt, And then they act like they are some kind of interceding, better than, all-knowing kind of establishment up there. Anyway, let's take it to what Jesus asked and see about the reply, right? Oh. Where was I? 40. When the Lord therefore of the vineyard cometh, what will he do unto those husbandmen? They say unto him, he will miserably destroy those wicked men, and will let out his vineyard unto other husbandmen, which will render him the fruits in their seasons. And this again, goes to show about the evil intentions within the heart say that you project out an image in a likeness, right? And to say that there's a savageness now in him to come and cut them down, to me seems, I don't know, it just seems like it doesn't seem correct. It doesn't have an actual solution in there. It's just more harm done. I feel like perhaps Jesus is alluding to something like this with his reply, because Jesus said unto them, did ye never read in the scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected is the same is become the head of the corner. This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous unto our eyes. Therefore I say unto you, the kingdom of God shall be taken from you and given unto the nations, springing forth the fruits thereof. And whosoever shall fall on this stone shall be broken, but on whomsoever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder. I think here that it's interesting because, again, Jesus sort of showcases how they've missed the whole point. They've missed the mark in the parable, and they've also twisted and inverted it back to being a vengeful, retribution of abuse. And he, in his reply back, it shows, just like in this very last verse, it's like, you've chosen to fall on that sharp sword. It's not that, and that's an action of your own. That's not a judgment from a father coming back and miserably destroying them. He'll be miserable in the destruction for certain, because he doesn't wish you to fall on that sword. But the fact that the sword is there and that it's very sharp, and instead of addressing it and circumnavigating it, even if that is for you to say you've been going in an incorrect direction. No, you'd rather keep going in that incorrect direction and maim yourself on it and bring on your own destruction, and then try to somehow say that it was his justice that destroyed you. It's, you know, the retribution of the husbandman is an irrelevant thought, is an irrelevant, worried, symptomatic reply that shows that you don't understand the depth of what was offered in the first place. And then he's trying to showcase that it's like, no, all that you've rejected and don't understand, the love that you missed of the whole point of it, that is to be the cornerstone, that is to be the foundation of the next real place, of the next vineyard that won't be destroyed, that cannot be destroyed. That's, and again, this is my interpretation. And I'd love to hear anybody else's, love to hear different ones or more traditional versions. If you've known one or heard, a classic, quote unquote, real pastor speaking about these things, I'd love to hear it. And we'll just finish up chapter 21 with the last here, 45 and 6, which say, and when the priests and did I say that wrong? Chief priests, I did. When the chief priests and Pharisees had heard his parables, they perceived that he spake of them. Well, duh. But when they sought to lay hands on him, they feared the multitude, because they took him as a prophet. It's like each one, there's always these little conclusions here, which they were very mad about, and seek to conspire against him. And so I just, for the life of me, can't understand if anyone actually goes to church and they read the Bible for themselves, or they read the Bible verbatim at church, to these closing scenes time and time again, to seeing the curtain call being the fact that the government and the synagogues are very upset with him shaking their boat. They're very worried about the change in tide that is being brought forth with truth and light, and honoring people for who they are, and calling out corruption that's been at hand. I just can't understand how we got to where we're at in this world today, with things like Judeo-Christian whateverness that there is out there, and I've talked about this different times, and especially my lead up to why I would do this Bible study or not. I spoke a little bit about my own personal past, and even, I was not brought up traditional any which way, but I did grow up in the same home, raised by my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, and my dad. My father's excommunicated from the church, from growing up, went to Catholic school, absolutely blames every one of his problems on that. Tried, Christian revival thing hit America in my dad's kind of 20 years. So this is when, the 60s, 70s or whatever, there was a big revival. And my family, his brothers and sister were caught up in that. My grandmother's very much caught up in that. So she went from being raised as a Catholic and being kind of secular, or just I don't know, just kind of like a Catholic in name only, but she went to church and of course celebrate the holidays and things like that. But with the revival in the Christian church and things, she got very into that, and born again and all that kind of stuff. She did a whole baptism, and my uncles and aunts are missionaries, Christian missionaries, and went all over the place, in different countries even, preaching. And so I grew up very aware of the church, but I also I was not brought up in it, and I was kind of brought up to see the joke of it, and to see the more of the bad sides of it than the good sides of it. But I also had, some good reference points, some different reference points that weren't always bad. And I know that I brought this up for a reason, and now I cannot, for the life of me, remember what, my grandmother, that's the point of it. My grandmother, being younger, growing up, she took care of us. She was very much home all the time. My dad kind of worked and wasn't around a lot. Well, he was around, he was there, but he worked a lot and stuff. And but my grandmother was so into this, she would donate to Israel. She had all of these, she went to Bible studies and did all these different things. And I'd always catch little tidbits of her. And like, she wore a Star of David, and like, I knew she's not Jewish, but she also had a friend who was a part of the Holocaust, who was German and not Jewish either. And surprisingly enough, although she lived, I won't give her whole story, and I couldn't tell it because I don't know it well enough, and I was a child when I heard any of this, so distortions happen, without me even being able to give a true testimony or anything. But I do know that she lived somewhere in Eastern Europe, maybe Poland. I forget exactly the country that she's from. Forgive me, poor Ruth, I don't remember. But she was a nice woman, but also, she was very good friends with my grandmother. But her family had helped people to get out of the place where she was from, and she was very much a part of a resistance and things like that. And so I always also grew up knowing that, as much as sometimes media wants to portray to us that all people sat silent and did nothing during this great time and all these things, there was plenty of people who did a lot. And a vision of what they think even happened, I know is not true for a fact. They overplayed so much of that in certain areas where, again, they totally turned blinders on in other areas where it very much took place, and to a lot of Christians, in fact, was never brought up. But anyways, I just cannot understand how it would ever become on the same sides, seeing and understanding the whole point of what Jesus is speaking about the corruption, about the inorganic inversions and manipulations of the law, and how the one law has gotten so far deviated away from it. He points out so many times. And it's like, these are all the things they all are still think are their foundations these days. They didn't change their things because of Jesus. They didn't go and edit their incorrectness here. No, they solidified in more deeply so that they couldn't be caught. Like special little lawyers that they are, jump into all the loopholes and solidified down the language so that it couldn't be caught up as easily anymore. So I just can't understand how that gap could be bridged. But some people, I guess, never look. Anyways, this has gone a little longer than intended, and now I've gotten on a bit of a personal rant here at the end, which I don't typically do in these sessions. So thanks for sticking around, if you have, for the end of that. And thank you for listening to the words and to the truth, and for taking part of your day out for that. I really appreciate it. Thanks for witnessing my contributions. Maybe I'll see you next week. Bye for now.